Most people imagine Christmas Eve as a warm, glowing evening, laughter drifting through the house, cinnamon in the air, soft music humming beneath conversation. But for me, Olivia Torres, age 38, last Christmas Eve didn't smell like cinnamon. It smelled like cold air, old pine boards, and the metallic sting of humiliation. My mother decided I wasn't presentable enough to sit at her dinner table. Not because my manners were poor, not because I hadn't been invited, but because of my clothing. A janitor's uniform, to be precise. She said it looked unsanitary, as if I might contaminate her guests with the indignity of working-class life. So she marched me to the enclosed back porch, pointed at a folding table with one wobbly leg, and told me to enjoy my dinner in peace. Peace was not what I felt. The porch was barely heated, and the December wind shoved its way through the old window frames like it was trying to join me for dinner. My fingers stiffened around the plastic fork she provided, and every inhale tasted faintly of dust. Through the French doors I could see the rest of the family, glowing gold beneath a chandelier whose bulbs cost more than my week's pay. They were drinking champagne from crystal flutes, each toast followed by a soft ripple of laughter. I was close enough to see their smiles, but far enough to be invisible. Mother, of course, loved that arrangement. In the middle of this chilly exile, when I'd finally tucked my numb hands into my sweater pockets, a slip of paper fluttered onto the porch floor. A photocopied Powerball ticket, its edges slightly creased from being carried around. The paper drifted like a feather, landing face up. Before I could bend down to pick it up, the porch door flew open. My mother, always vigilant when something looked expensive, snatched it before it even cooled on the wooden planks. "What's this?" she asked, though her widening eyes already answered the question for her. The jackpot number printed at the bottom had been all over the news for weeks. $100 million. My mother, the same woman who'd insisted I was too poor-looking to sit inside, transformed instantly. She clutched the ticket with both hands, her voice lifting with manic delight. "It's mine," she breathed, like that paper had been waiting its whole life to fall onto her floors. What she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was that she wasn't holding the real ticket at all. The original winning ticket had been quietly redeemed 3 weeks earlier, and the money had already been placed into accounts she didn't know existed. Much of it had gone into a charitable trust. The rest was secured with a lawyer who understood discretion. My mother had no idea she was clinging to a photocopy, no idea that she had just exposed her truest self, desperate, greedy, and ready to claim as hers anything that touched her meticulously polished floors. That moment, the manic hunger in her eyes, became etched in my memory like a scar. If you've ever had someone dismiss your worth, only to claw for your success the second it appears, then you'll understand the cold clarity that washed over me that night. And that was only the beginning. Because what my mother did next, what my whole family did next, turned a quiet humiliation into a public spectacle I could never have predicted. To understand why my mother lunged for that fallen slip of paper like a starving hawk, you have to understand the world she lives in, and the world she believes she deserves. My mother, Margaret Torres, arrived at adulthood cushioned by money she never earned. My grandmother, Eleanor, had built a bakery empire from scratch in the 1960s, growing it from a single storefront to a regional chain. She worked dawn to midnight, burned her hands on ovens, hired neighborhood teens, and saved every spare penny until she could buy more locations. When she eventually sold the business to a national corporation, she became wealthy, but she remained grounded. My mother did not inherit that grounding. She inherited the wealth. She grew up with private schools, summers in Italy, and a belief that her comfort was evidence of superiority rather than luck. When she was old enough, she waltzed into a regional bank director role, not because of talent, but because my grandmother's reputation hovered like a golden halo around her. Her entire life resembled a stage set built by someone else, and she treated it as proof that she belonged on the top tier of humanity. The house she lived in, my grandmother's house, only reinforced that illusion. 7 bedrooms, polished Italian marble, chandeliers that dripped like icy waterfalls. Every Christmas, the place filled with relatives orbiting my mother like planets around a sun made of inheritance. They arrived not for celebration, but for positioning, another chance to polish their place in her will. My younger brother, Daniel, basked in that glow most of all. the golden child. Though no one could list an actual accomplishment of his without consulting police records or bounced loan statements. He was the kind of person who mistook recklessness for genius. 6 failed businesses, hundreds of thousands in debt. And yet, every family gathering, my mother held him up like he was a misunderstood prodigy on the verge of a breakthrough. By contrast, I was the cautionary tale. The daughter who'd flown too close to the sun with her tech startup, only to crash and burn. I'd put everything into my company, my savings, my retirement, the equity in my condo, and when one major client defaulted, the collapse was swift. The bankruptcy hearing took place in the same office building where I now scrub floors, though my mother never lets me forget that ironic twist. She likes to humiliate me publicly, as if my fall justifies her pride. She calls it tough love, but anyone with eyes can see it's theater. An audience is required. And the audience always applauds. She'd done it again this year. Before sending me to the porch, she delivered her traditional holiday speech, raising her champagne glass to announce that she would be updating her will. "Everything will go to Daniel," she said, gazing directly at me while relatives nodded along. After all, he's the one who shows ambition. The hypocrisy would have been laughable if it weren't so predictable. In their world, ambition only counts when it comes with safety nets, bailouts, and mommy's checkbook. It was in that atmosphere, one of arrogance, entitlement, and cruelty masquerading as sophistication, that my mother held a photocopied lottery ticket to the chandelier light like it was a holy relic. She didn't wonder how I could have afforded it. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't even consider that I might have bought it. She saw only the number, $100 million. And in that moment, every inch of her polished persona melted into raw, feral greed. But the thing about greed is that once it wakes, it spreads fast, faster than truth, faster than reason, and soon my entire family was swept into a frenzy that revealed exactly who they had always been. The moment my mother clutched that photocopied ticket, the room reacted the way dry grass reacts to a spark, suddenly, violently, all at once. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. Even the caterers paused, their hands stilling over trays of trifle and champagne. Every eye locked onto that slim rectangle of paper crumpled in her fist. Daniel's reaction was the loudest. He stumbled from his chair, nearly knocking over a crystal decanter as he lunged toward her, shouting, "Is that the one? That's the winning one, isn't it?" His voice cracked with the same exhilaration gamblers get when they think their luck has finally turned. His pupils were blown wide, half alcohol, half desperation. My mother pressed the ticket to her chest like a shield. "It fell onto my property," she declared. "That makes it mine." The entitlement in her tone could have filled the whole mansion. Jennifer, always hungry for views, lifted her phone automatically. "Oh my God," she whispered to her livestream audience. "This could be huge." The comment bubbles reflected in her oversized, glittery eyeshadow, each one a tiny chorus cheering for the unfolding drama. Her viewers asked who won, who found it, who it belonged to. She ignored all of them. Her only concern was capturing the spectacle. Uncle Robert, the family's resident amateur lawyer whose actual courtroom experience was limited to parking tickets, stepped into the center of the chaos like he was presiding over a trial. "Legally speaking," he began, straightening his tie, "possession is 9/10 of the law." He said it with such certainty that half the room nodded, though it was obvious he was reciting something he'd heard on a TV show. Aunt Patricia gasped dramatically. "So it's really hers?" she asked, already imagining how this newfound fortune might trickle into her direction through some distant cousin logic. "Of course it's mine," my mother repeated, gripping the photocopy so tightly the paper wrinkled against her palms. Her voice was triumphant, manic, vibrating with the greed that had always lurked beneath her polished composure. "God brought this to me as a sign, as though divine intervention favored those who humiliated their own children." I watched the scene unfold from near the foyer, my coat still half on, the bitter cold still clinging to my sleeves. Not a single person, even those who had ignored me for the entire night, asked why I had the ticket in the first place. They didn't care. Curiosity doesn't flourish in a room full of people already imagining themselves wealthy. Daniel, still breathing hard, grabbed at the edge of the ticket. "Let me see." "I need to." My mother jerked it away as if he were a thief instead of the son she'd sold her soul to protect. She lifted her chin. "You will get your share when I decide," she snapped. "Do not presume ownership." The hypocrisy nearly choked me. These people who had sneered at me for years, who had labeled me the family embarrassment, were now tripping over each other for a scrap of paper they didn't even know was authentic. Their greed was so loud, so frantic, so unrestrained that it drowned out everything else. And in the uproar, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not revenge, but a cold, steady clarity. Watching them claw for a fortune they didn't earn revealed more truth than any argument ever could. And the deeper their frenzy dug, the more astonishing their behavior became, until even the house's marble floors couldn't hide the ugliness rising to the surface. Inside the dining room, the chandelier's glow gave everything an almost holy radiance. Polished silver, crystal glasses, faces glistening with expectation. But the holiness was an illusion. Beneath that gold light, ugliness spread like a stain. My mother, drunk on imagined riches, climbed onto the small step near the head of the table and tapped her champagne flute. The sound rang through the room, delicate yet commanding. Even the chatter of greedy speculation died instantly. Every relative turned toward her, their eyes shining with a mixture of reverence and self-interest, like parishioners awaiting a sermon promising salvation. She held the photocopied ticket aloft, its creases catching the light. "Before we continue our lovely evening," she announced, her voice swelling with a grandeur she had not earned, "I want to share something important with all of you." She wasn't trembling from emotion. She was trembling from excitement, like someone seconds away from claiming a crown. Daniel moved closer, half leaning on the back of Uncle Robert's chair for support. His breath smelled like whiskey and bad decisions. "Tell them, Mom," he slurred, but loudly enough to contribute to the theater. He wanted witnesses. He wanted applause. He wanted credit for nothing. My mother raised her chin. "This ticket," she pressed it to her chest as though absorbing its value through her suit, "came into my possession tonight. In my home. On my floor." She paused dramatically, letting her audience hang in the silence. A $100 million winning ticket. A wave of gasps rolled through the room, the kind usually reserved for miracles or scandals. Chairs scraped, glasses clinked. Even people who barely knew her leaned in, eager to bask in the reflected glow of fortune. Jennifer's phone was pointed at my mother, capturing every moment for her live stream. "Everyone, this is real," she whispered breathlessly to her viewers. "This is actually happening." My mother continued, basking in attention. As the rightful holder of his fortune, she glanced almost triumphantly toward the porch where I had eaten alone. "I believe it is time to update all of you on my future intentions." My stomach turned with déjà vu. She loved these moments, public declarations designed to humiliate, to wield power like a scepter. She savored the suspense she created. "I have decided," she proclaimed, "that my entire estate, including this new blessing, will go to Daniel." Applause erupted as if on cue. It wasn't genuine joy. It was opportunism. Everyone in that room knew aligning with Daniel meant aligning with potential money. Even his failures were excused under the assumption that one day, some miracle would justify their loyalty. Daniel preened under the attention. "I'll make you proud, Mom," he declared, puffing out his chest like a child who'd been handed a toy he didn't deserve. But my mother wasn't finished. She looked directly at me through the glass doors, as though aiming her next words like arrows. "As for Olivia," she said, voice dipped in venom disguised as pity, "she has shown that she lacks the ambition for success. Leaving her money would only encourage further waste. Her choices speak for themselves." The words hit the room with smug certainty. Heads nodded. Aunts whispered. Cousins exchanged knowing glances. No one questioned her cruelty. They simply absorbed it as truth. From the porch, the cold pressed against my spine. I watched them choose the version of me my mother had curated, pitiful, unworthy, disposable. But what struck me wasn't the insult. It was how quickly they embraced it. Because nothing exposes a person's heart more clearly than watching who they cheer for and who they're willing to trample the moment money enters the room. The cold on the porch seeped through my sweater until my bones felt stiff, but the chill wasn't what bothered me most. It was the heat of their laughter, the kind that keeps echoing in your chest long after the sound dies. Through the glass, I could see them basking in self-congratulation, relishing not just the food and wealth, but the hierarchy they believed was natural. My mother at the top, Daniel behind her like a sloppy prince, and the rest circling them the way moths circle bright lights without realizing they're burning. My plate sat untouched on the folding table. The beef Wellington had congealed into an unappetizing mass, gravy stiff like glue. My hands curled around the edge of the table for warmth. Every so often, I caught snippets of conversation filtering through the cracks. Praise for Daniel, speculation about how they'd spend our family's new fortune. Snide comments about how lucky I was just to be invited. Lucky. That word pricked my skin. My mother rarely concerned herself with whether I was cold, hungry, or humiliated, as long as the scene served her storyline. That night, the storyline was clear. Daniel was her legacy, I was her cautionary tale. She said it so many times that people believed it without thinking. After 20 long minutes, my toes tingled with numbness and I stood, ready to leave quietly. I lifted the paper plate to throw away the uneaten food, prepared to thank her through gritted teeth and get into my old Honda. I wanted to disappear before they had another chance to sneer. But when I stepped inside, the room fell silent. Not out of guilt, no, they stared because they were annoyed that the background character had stepped onto center stage. Daniel smirked. "Hey, sis," he called with exaggerated cheerfulness. "While you're up, how about clearing the table?" His arm swept lazily across the untouched dessert plates. "You're used to that kind of thing, right?" A few cousins chuckled. Some didn't. Embarrassment flickered across the faces of the caterers, but none dared intervene. They were employees. They knew better. My mother sipped her champagne like a queen humoring a jester. "At least contribute something to the evening," she said sweetly, though the edge in her tone was sharp enough to draw blood. I clung to politeness. "I should go," I murmured, turning toward the foyer. Mother clicked her tongue. "Running away again. You always do this, Olivia. No follow-through. No resilience. This is why you ended up mopping floors instead of managing employees." She gestured for attention, inviting the room to witness her critique. My jaw tightened as the air thickened with judgment. I reached for my coat, threadbare, faded, the same one she'd mocked years before. And as I pulled it off the hook, something shifted in my pocket, something that made the fabric rustle in a way that drew eyes. Jennifer, filming again, smirked. "Lose something," she teased. Mother's brows snapped together. "Honestly, Olivia," she scoffed, "you can't even keep track of—" And then the paper slipped from my pocket. The familiar fluttering sound cut through the dining room as the photocopied lottery ticket spiraled down onto the marble floor. All conversation died instantly. Every head turned. And my mother, who had ignored me for hours, moved with a speed that stunned the room. She dove. Not bent, not crouched. She dove for the ticket like a person trying to catch a falling diamond. And once she touched that paper, the last thin layer of decency in the room shattered, revealing a hunger that no amount of wealth could ever satisfy. The moment my mother's fingers closed around the photocopied ticket, the room reacted like someone had dropped a live grenade in the middle of the marble floor. People surged toward her in a wave, not to help her up, but to get closer to the supposed fortune she had just snatched from under everyone's noses. She rose slowly, clutching the paper so tightly it crumpled in her palm. Her face was flushed, her breathing shallow, her eyes bright with a feverish gleam I had never seen before, though maybe it had always been there, waiting for the right spark. "It's mine," she declared, her voice trembling. "It fell in my home, on my floors." She smoothed her St. John's suit as if restoring her dignity, unaware she'd just sacrificed it completely. Daniel stepped forward, his arrogance returning. "Then we're saved," he crowed. "Mom, this is everything. This clears my debts. I knew it. I told everyone something big was coming our way." He said it like the universe had finally rewarded his recklessness. But my mother turned on him with sudden ferocity. "Not everything is about you, Daniel. This is my blessing." She pressed the ticket against her chest, as if absorbing its worth through fabric. That selfishness, the instinctive hoarding, the refusal to even pretend generosity, cast a cold hush over the room. Even the relatives who worshipped her paused, exchanging wary glances. Greed is magnetic, but it's also dangerous when people sense they might be cut out. Uncle Robert, always eager to sound authoritative, adjusted his tie and stepped into the center of the group. "Legally," he said, "what matters is possession. If Olivia dropped the ticket and was leaving the premises, that would constitute abandonment." He looked at me as if expecting a rebuttal. I simply watched, arms crossed, saying nothing. "An abandoned property," he continued, "belongs to the property owner. Margaret has every right to claim it." My mother nodded eagerly. "Exactly. It's simple. Olivia forfeited it." Jennifer panned her phone across the room, narrating like she'd been hired to cover a high-profile scandal. "Guys, you're seeing this live. A real lottery ticket. A $100 million jackpot. This is insane." Her viewers commented in a frenzy, little hearts and shocked emojis flooding the corner of her screen. But no one, not one person, considered asking me how long I'd had the ticket, why I'd carried it, why it had been in my coat pocket. They didn't want context. They wanted a story where they came out rich. My mother lifted her chin and walked to the nearest table, setting the ticket down like it was a holy artifact. "We need to call the Lottery Commission immediately," she declared. "We must verify it before anyone tries to interfere." Interfere. That's what she called me, simply existing. Daniel hovered like a storm cloud. "Mom, put it on speaker. Everyone should hear this." Everyone. The same people who wouldn't hand me a napkin if I were bleeding. As she typed in the number, relatives crowded behind her, practically breathing on her neck, each one dreaming of how they'd spend money that never belonged to them. And I watched, quiet and steady, as their greed dug its claws in deeper, twisting their faces into something almost unrecognizable. Because once the call connected and a certain voice answered, the first cracks in their fantasy began to split open, and no one in that room was prepared for what followed. The room fell into an expectant hush as my mother pressed the phone to speaker. Even the clatter of dishes in the kitchen stopped, as though the staff sensed something monumental was about to unfold. The relatives pressed closer, their breaths audible, their eyes locked on the crumpled photocopy lying on the polished table like some sacred script. A monotone, automated voice crackled through the speaker. "Thank you for calling the State Lottery Commission. For prize verification, press 1. Mother stabbed the number with manic urgency. Daniel bounced anxiously beside her, wringing his hands like a child waiting to open a present. Jennifer lifted her phone higher, whispering to her viewers, "This is real. You're seeing this. You're literally hearing the Lottery Commission." Then a human voice replaced the recorded one. "State Lottery Commission prize verification. This is Patricia. How may I help you?" I knew that voice. Calm, firm, polite, and entirely unprepared for the storm about to hit her. Mother all but shouted into the phone. "I have the winning Powerball ticket. The $100 million one. I need to verify it immediately." There was a brief pause, likely Patricia bracing herself for either a scammer or a hysterical winner. "Of course, ma'am. Could you please read me the codes on the ticket?" Mother read each number with dramatic precision, stopping between groups as if giving the room time to soak in her triumph. Daniel nodded along vigorously, mouthing each number like they were lines in a play. "Thank you," Patricia said. We could hear clicking on her keyboard. "One moment while I check our system." The room froze. No one breathed. Even Jennifer momentarily stopped narrating. Then Patricia returned. "Ma'am," she said slowly, "this ticket was already claimed." My mother blinked. "That's impossible. I am holding it." "No, ma'am," Patricia repeated gently. "The original winning ticket matching those numbers was redeemed 3 weeks ago." The silence cracked like a splintering mirror. My mother's shoulders stiffened, her mouth half open. Daniel shook his head violently. No. That can't be right. Are you sure? Double-check it." Patricia continued over the noise. "The ticket was brought in on December 7th at 2:47 p.m. The prize has already been issued and the funds distributed." A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Jennifer lowered her phone, her eyes wide. Uncle Robert repeated the date under his breath as though it were a curse. Patricia added calmly, "The individual who claimed it provided proper identification and is listed as one moment." There was typing again. "Listed as Olivia Torres." My name hit the room like thunder. 30 faces turned toward me at once, disbelief painted on every expression. The relatives who had ignored me for hours now stared like I'd betrayed them, as though I owed them the fantasy they'd already built around my mother's delusion. Margaret's face drained of color. "No," she whispered. "No, that's wrong. She couldn't." But Patricia's voice kept going, professional and unbothered. "Just so you're aware, ma'am, photocopies have no legal value. The original is already secured in our vault. Is there anything else I can help you with?" It was the softest, cleanest shattering of their illusions I had ever witnessed. And in the stunned vacuum that followed, the ugliness they had tried to hide for years erupted all at once, sharp as broken glass and twice as dangerous. For a moment, no one moved. The words hung in the room like smoke, listed as Olivia Torres. It was almost eerie, the way the sound drained from the space. The relatives stood frozen, caught between disbelief and the dawning realization that everything they just fought over, everything they'd humiliated themselves for, was nothing more than a photocopy. My mother's hand trembled violently as she clutched the worthless slip of paper. This can't be right," she stammered. "I have the ticket. I'm holding it." She lowered it and lifted it to the chandelier light again, as though the illumination might magically transform it into something real. But the flaws were obvious now. The faint pixelation, the too even white background, the slight smudging on the edges. The truth stared back at her. Daniel snatched the photocopy from her hands. "No, it has to be real. It has to be." He scrutinized the paper, flipping it over, holding it to the light, even smelling it, as if authenticity carried a scent. His voice cracked. She must have tricked us." The accusation snapped the room out of its paralysis. Aunt Patricia clutched her pearls. "You tricked your own family," she gasped at me, even though I'd done nothing but stand quietly by the door. Uncle Robert pointed a shaky finger. "You dropped it on purpose. You wanted us to make fools of ourselves." Jennifer zoomed in on my face with her phone, her voice tight. "My viewers think you planned this. That you set us up." Their desperation was almost theatrical. I stood with my hands folded, calm as still water. "I dropped a piece of paper," I said evenly. "The rest was your own doing." "That's a lie," my mother snapped, but her voice cracked under the weight of the truth. Her face reddened, then blanched, then tightened with bitterness. You deceptive, ungrateful." She stopped only because the room was watching. Grandma Eleanor, silent through most of the chaos, shifted slightly in her wheelchair. Her eyes, sharp, observing, unclouded by the hysteria, were fixed on my mother, not me. And in that gaze there was something dangerous. Disappointment, maybe, or judgment, or a realization finally settling in after years of denial. Daniel paced like a trapped animal. "So she has the money, all of it, 60-something million. He stopped abruptly and jabbed a finger toward me. "Where is it? You don't look rich." The room murmured in agreement. How could I possibly be wealthy in my thrift store clothes? Greed makes people blind. I met Daniel's glare calmly. "I didn't come here to announce anything. I came because it was Christmas." "Don't lie," my mother hissed. "You came to humiliate me. To mock me. To attend dinner," I said. She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. The room began unraveling. Relatives whispered about how I had betrayed the family, how I had kept secrets, how I dared to show up looking poor when I apparently wasn't. Someone muttered that I owed them an explanation. Someone else said I owed them gratitude. It was astonishing to watch their narrative shift, not to introspection, not to shame, but to entitlement. They genuinely believed that my fortune, earned through luck or not, belonged to them. And beneath the noise, beneath the growing accusations, beneath the frantic grasping at excuses, one undeniable truth grew louder. They weren't angry I'd won. They were angry I hadn't lost. And the moment they realized the money was already gone, already out of their reach, that anger mutated into a fury I had seen only once before, and never from this many faces at once. The moment the truth settled, that I had not only claimed the ticket weeks earlier but had already moved the money, the room erupted in a frenzy, so intense it felt like the air vibrated. Their bewilderment twisted into something sharper, more personal, as though my financial decisions had been crafted with the sole intention of wounding them. Daniel's voice cracked into a shout. "Where is it then? Where's the rest of the money?" He stepped toward me, his face blotchy and uneven. You better not have wasted it. You better not have done something stupid. My mother lurched forward, gripping the side of the table to steady herself. Tell us you at least kept it, she demanded. Tell us you didn't throw away the one chance this family had to regain its standing. Standing. That was what mattered to her. Not security, not relationships, not love. Just the illusion of power she liked to display like a brooch on her expensive suit. I reached calmly into my purse, a plain canvas tote that looked nothing like the designer bags scattered around the room, and pulled out a sheet of paper. The room leaned in collectively, breath held, eyes greedy. It wasn't what they expected. This, I said, unfolding it, is the establishment certificate for the charitable trust where $90 million of the winnings now reside. I didn't need to raise my voice. The silence did more than volume ever could. My mother blinked at the page as though it were a prank. Charity, she echoed. The word landed on her tongue like poison. You gave away $90 million? Correct. Daniel staggered back as if physically hit. Why would you do that? Why would you throw it away? His voice cracked. That's my... He caught himself, but not in time. I mean, that's our family's money. No, I replied. It was my decision. And I made it. My mother's lips trembled, her voice trembling with outrage. You selfish girl. After everything I sacrificed for you, this is what you do. You give it to strangers. Strangers instead of your own blood. You're not upset about generosity, I said softly. You're upset you weren't the one holding the pen. A few relatives murmured in agreement, quiet, guilty murmurs, but none dared contradict her outright. The truth was a dangerous thing in a room built on illusion. Jennifer, still clutching her phone though she'd stopped streaming, whispered, But why would you give it away? She wasn't angry, just confused, the way people become when presented with a choice their world has never taught them to understand. I created something that will outlive me, I said. A foundation for women who failed the way I once did, women who need another chance. Women like I used to be. My mother scoffed. Failures. Yes, that fits. But what about your real family? The people who deserve your support. A slow heat rose in my chest. Not anger, exactly, but a deep, steady resolve. Deserve. I echoed. Deserve as earned. Not inherited by proximity. Daniel let out a frustrated roar. So what did you keep? 10 million. Just 10. He said it like it was an insult, a symbol of incompetence. Yes, I answered. 10 million is enough. My mother's face twisted into disbelief. Enough for what? To build a life I choose, I said. Enough to stand on my own. Enough to walk away. Enough to never need their version of love again. And yet for all their outrage at my generosity, nothing compared to what happened when they learned where I planned to take the next step, because that revelation cut deeper than the money ever could. Their anger over the foundation still burned hot when I reached into my bag once more. I could feel their eyes tracking every movement of my fingers, anticipation sharpening their expressions into something almost predatory. They expected more money, another check, another confession, another reason to label me irresponsible. But what I pulled out next wasn't about money. It was about history, a deed transfer, a fresh, official document printed on thick legal paper, embossed with the city's seal. When I unfolded it, several relatives leaned in so far they nearly toppled over. My mother stared at the document like it might reveal a secret path back to wealth. What is that? She demanded, her voice cracking. This, I said, smoothing the page, is the deed to the Meridian office building. There was a collective intake of breath, sharp, audible, and followed by stunned silence. The Meridian, the same building where my company had once stood, the same building where I'd signed bankruptcy papers, the same building where I had mopped floors for 5 long years, pushing a janitorial cart past executives who didn't bother to look up. Jennifer's phone slipped slightly in her hand. Wait, she whispered. You own it. I nodded once. Daniel squinted, confused. But isn't that where you work? Not anymore, I replied. I bought it 2 weeks ago through a shell company. The sale finalized yesterday. The silence that followed was jagged, broken only by the faint buzz of the chandelier's dimmer. They stared at me with expressions that flickered between disbelief, envy, and something close to fear. My mother swallowed hard. Why would you buy that building? Of all places. Why indeed? I let the question hang for a moment before answering. Because it's where I lost everything, I said, and where I rebuilt myself. And now it's where the second chance's foundation will operate. A ripple went through the room. Some relatives blinked, confused by the symbolism. Others understood instantly, and those were the ones whose faces tightened. Uncle Robert spoke first. You mean your office, the one on the 15th floor? Suite 1520, I confirmed. It's being renovated now. The staff moves in next month. Daniel laughed, a short, harsh bark. So you're going to be CEO of a charity, sitting in your old office like nothing happened? I wasn't sure if he meant it as an insult or an accusation. I'm going to lead a foundation that will help hundreds of people find second chances, I said evenly. People who don't have family money to cushion their falls. My mother's expression twisted, the shock mixing with something far darker. So you're telling us, she said slowly, that while we thought you were cleaning toilets, you were buying the whole building. The disdain in her voice wasn't subtle. Cleaning toilets was shameful to her. Working for a living was shameful. My success only mattered if she could take credit for it. I worked hard for 5 years, I said quietly. Nothing about that is shameful. It's humiliating, she snapped. No, I corrected, meeting her eyes. What's humiliating is how this family treats people who've fallen. Her gaze faltered, only for a second, but I saw it. A flicker of recognition. A mirror held up. Jennifer finally lowered her phone, her voice small. So you're really not struggling anymore? No, I said. And I haven't been for a while. But what struck me wasn't their shock, it was the bitterness settling into their features. They weren't upset because I'd suffered. They were upset because they couldn't anymore. And just when the tension reached its breaking point, a voice rose from the corner, steady, deliberate, and powerful enough to change the entire direction of the night. The room had devolved into a quivering mass of resentment and disbelief, all eyes darting between me, the photocopied ticket, and the deed resting on the polished table. The chandelier hummed with a faint electrical buzz, the only sound in a space suddenly thick with tension. And then a voice cut through it, a voice no one dared speak over. I've seen enough. Every head snapped in the direction of the sound. My grandmother, Eleanor Torres, was standing, not sitting, not slumped in her wheelchair, standing. 4 years, everyone believed she'd lost the ability to walk. My mother encouraged that belief, parading her around as a fragile relic deserving constant admiration. But the truth was different. Grandma was perfectly capable of standing. She simply observed more keenly when everyone assumed she couldn't. The effect on the room was immediate. People straightened their posture. Jennifer lowered her phone. Daniel muttered something unintelligible and stepped back. My mother, pale as a snowdrift, clutched the table for balance. Mother, she stammered, you shouldn't be on your feet. Sit down, Margaret, Grandma said coldly, before you embarrass yourself further. Margaret sank instantly into the nearest chair, her expression flickering between fear and outrage. Grandma's gaze swept across the room, slow, deliberate, surgical. She took in the spilled champagne, the scrunched photocopy, the greedy eyes, the entitlement thick enough to choke the air. And then she looked at me. Her expression softened, not with pity, but with understanding. I asked Olivia to let me see something tonight, Grandma said. And now I have. She lifted her chin. I wanted to see each of you for who you truly are when wealth enters the room. A shiver ran through the crowd. Jennifer tucked her phone away completely. Uncle Robert cleared his throat, but made no sound. Daniel avoided Grandma's eyes like they burned. Grandma continued, I watched a daughter humiliate her own child in front of 30 people. I watched grown adults cheer as that humiliation escalated. And when money seemed to appear, she gestured at the photocopy. I watched those same adults claw like animals. No one dared to move. My mother opened her mouth to defend herself, but Grandma didn't allow it. I'm speaking, she said sharply. And you, Margaret, should be the one listening most. Mother snapped her mouth shut. Grandma walked, slow but steady, toward the center of the room. Olivia, she said, you have carried yourself tonight with more dignity than anyone here deserves. You lost everything once, and instead of collapsing, you rebuilt yourself. Not with arrogance, not with theatrics, but with quiet resilience. Her eyes hardened as she turned to the others. The rest of you? You have revealed yourselves completely. My mother clasped her hands together. Mother, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Grandma interrupted. I understand that you sent your daughter to eat in the cold. I understand that you lunged for a ticket you thought would make you rich. And I understand that your cruelty has been festering for years. The silence was suffocating. And so, Grandma concluded, I will be making changes. My mother looked like she'd swallowed a stone. Changes, she whispered. Grandma reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out her phone. I've already spoken with my attorney, she said. And what happens next is final. Because before anyone could beg, plead, or protest, Grandma revealed something that shifted the entire foundation of the family, and none of them were ready to face it. Grandma stood at the center of the room, her cane steady, her posture straight as a blade. All the gleaming marble, all the chandeliers, all the curated luxury of the house suddenly looked cheap compared to the authority radiating from her. She tapped her phone screen once. Maria, she said, put me on speaker. A crisp voice responded instantly. Yes, Mrs. Torres. I'm here. My mother inhaled sharply. Mother, we don't need to do this right now. Silence, Grandma commanded. Margaret froze. Grandma looked around the room, taking in every face, some still flushed from excitement, others pale with dread. I instructed my attorney, she announced, to update my will based on what I witnessed tonight. A ripple of fear passed through the family like a cold draft. Maria's voice came through the phone, calm and professional. The changes have been made. Would you like me to read the revisions, Mrs. Torres? Yes, Grandma said. Let's ensure everyone hears clearly. Margaret squeezed the edge of the table, knuckles white. Maria continued. Effective immediately, Margaret Torres is removed as beneficiary of the estate valued at $19.6 million. Gasps shot through the room. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Mother, what are you saying? You can't. I can, Grandma replied. And I have. You can't do this to me. Margaret cried. I am your daughter. And Olivia's mine as well, Grandma retorted. But only one of you possesses integrity. Margaret stumbled back into her chair, shock hollowing her expression. It wasn't just about money. She had believed, truly believed, that inheritance was her birthright, her destiny, her validation. Losing it wasn't a financial blow. It was identity-shattering. Maria continued reading, her voice steady. The portion previously designated to Margaret will now be transferred in full to the Second Chances Foundation upon Mrs. Torres's passing. Daniel made a choke sound. What? All of it? That money was supposed to. Grandma cut him off with a glare sharp enough to slice. You were never entitled to anything, Daniel. Nothing in this family has ever taught you the meaning of work. That ends now. He swayed, stunned. Maria went on. The trust fund set aside for Daniel Torres, scheduled to distribute $1 million upon his 40th birthday, has also been dissolved. Those funds will likewise be transferred to the foundation. Daniel's jaw fell open. You can't just. I can, Grandma said again, her tone final. And I have. Some relatives avoided eye contact entirely, quietly calculating how this upheaval affected their own imagined future slices of the estate. Others watched with a mixture of awe and fear, realizing the matriarch they underestimated had sharper claws than any of them. My mother shook her head, whispering, No, 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 like a spell gone wrong. Grandma approached her slowly. 4 years, I turned a blind eye to the way you treated your family, especially Olivia. I told myself you were stressed, or misunderstood, or trying too hard. But tonight, I saw what you truly are. Margaret's eyes brimmed with tears. Grandma's voice softened, not with warmth but with sorrow. You've spent your whole life mistaking cruelty for authority and entitlement for success. I will not fund that delusion any longer. The chandelier flickered slightly, as if reacting to the tension. The room was silent, struck by the weight of everything collapsing at once. But even as the will was rewritten and their futures dissolved, the night's most devastating blow had yet to fall, and it came from a direction none of them expected. Margaret sat rigidly in her chair, her face draining of color as the reality of her disinheritance settled over her like a suffocating blanket. The living room, her stage, her domain, seemed to close in around her. The marble floors she'd always boasted about suddenly felt colder. The chandelier she adored no longer shone for her. But Grandma wasn't finished. Not even close. She turned in a slow circle, surveying the extended family with a gaze that made everyone stand a little straighter. Years of wealth, comfort, and pretense had made them arrogant. Now each one waited, breath held, for her final verdict. "There's one more matter," Grandma said, her tone cool enough to frost the windows. "A very important one." Margaret wiped her eyes, attempting to compose herself. "Mother, please, whatever else you're planning, can we discuss it privately?" "No," Grandma said. "We will address everything in front of the same witnesses who watched you demean my granddaughter." Daniel opened his mouth, likely to argue, plead, or bargain, but wisely shut it when Grandma's eyes snapped toward him. She lifted her phone again. "Maria, please confirm the ownership of this residence." Everyone stiffened. Even I held my breath. "Yes, Mrs. Torres," Maria replied. "The Westchester property is fully in your name. It was never legally transferred to Margaret." Half the room gasped. The other half had suspected, but never dared ask. Margaret blinked rapidly, confused. "No, that's wrong. I've lived here for 20 years. You gave me this house." Grandma's expression tightened. "I let you live here. I never gave it to you." But father. "Your father wanted you to have a home. I wanted you to have responsibility." Her voice sharpened. "You managed only one of those." A tremor rippled through Margaret's shoulders. "You're not seriously thinking." "I am," Grandma said. "Margaret, you have 60 days to leave this house." The words struck like a physical blow. Margaret shook her head in disbelief. "Mother, you can't uproot me. This is my home. Everything I have is here." "That is exactly why you must leave," Grandma replied. "This house has coddled you, enabled you, blinded you. You need to learn how to stand without it propping you up." Daniel sputtered. "Where is she supposed to go? A hotel? An apartment? She doesn't know how to live like that." "That," Grandma replied, "is not my concern." Across the room, I watched relatives exchange wide-eyed looks. Some pitied my mother. Others reveled in the drama. But the truth was clear in every gaze. No one had expected the matriarch to take such decisive action. Margaret pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "Please. I've dedicated my life to this family. You can't take away everything." "Everything," Grandma echoed. "Everything was handed to you. You built nothing. And tonight, you nearly stole from your own daughter." The words echoed through the cavernous room like a gavel. My mother sank deeper into her chair, shoulders collapsing under a weight heavier than any financial loss. And as she stared at the crumpled photocopy still lying on the table, I realized she wasn't mourning losing the house. But while Margaret unraveled, another member of the family was about to face consequences even more painful, consequences that would expose exactly how far desperation can push a person. As my mother collapsed into quiet despair, the room's attention shifted, slowly, reluctantly, to Daniel. He stood near the bar, one hand gripping a half-empty glass of whiskey, the other clenched around nothing at all. His face had gone a chalky shade of gray, as if the gravity of Grandma's words were physically draining the color from him. It wasn't the loss of inheritance that terrified him. It was the people who were counting on that inheritance. Daniel's debts weren't the kind you could negotiate with a friendly phone call or a payment plan. His creditors weren't banks or credit unions. They were men who didn't text reminders. They sent warnings. Ominous ones. He'd once bragged about it at Thanksgiving, how he was working with serious investors. At the time, the relatives nodded politely, pretending to understand. Now, standing in Grandma's living room, the truth hung around him like the scent of gasoline. He needed that money to stay alive. And everyone knew it. When Daniel's phone began to ring, shrilly, insistently, the room stilled. He glanced at the screen, and the blood drained entirely from his face. "Don't answer it," Aunt Patricia whispered, clutching her necklace as if it might ward off whatever danger echoed through the ringer. But Daniel answered anyway, throat tight. Hello." The voice on the other end was loud enough that several of us heard it. Cold, calm, unmistakably dangerous. "You've got 48 hours. Daniel's hand shook. I told you. I told you I'd have it." "You said Christmas," the voice interrupted. "It's Christmas. So where's the money?" Daniel swallowed. There was a complication. The line fell silent for a moment. Then the voice replied, "We don't care about complications." The call ended abruptly. For a long moment, Daniel simply stared at his phone, his breathing shallow, lips parting as though he needed more air than the room allowed. My mother shot up from her chair. "Daniel," she said, grabbing his arm. "It's fine. It's fine. We'll fix this. We can figure it out. Mother, tell them you'll reconsider. Tell them." "No," Grandma said firmly. "I will not bankroll this chaos anymore." "You're sentencing him," Margaret cried. "Do you understand what you're doing?" "I understand perfectly," Grandma replied. "Your son placed himself in danger. That is the consequence of his choices, not mine." Daniel turned to me, desperation contorting his features. "Olivia," he breathed, "you can help. You have millions. Just lend me something. Anything. Please." And for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't arrogance or entitlement. Fear. Real fear. But I also remember the mockery, the cruelty, the years of being the family punchline, the porch, the cold, the jokes about mopping floors. I remember the 2 a.m. phone call where he'd slurred, "Maybe you can mop up my blood when they're done with me." I met his gaze and said softly, "I'm sorry you're afraid, but I won't fund the same choices that destroyed you." He stared at me, stunned, not angry, not outraged, just stunned. "You'd let me die," he whispered. "No," I said. "I'd let you be responsible." My mother released a guttural sound, part sob, part fury, part disbelief. "You heartless girl," she spat. "You're condemning your brother." "No," Grandma said sharply, stepping between us. "He condemned himself." The room was silent except for Daniel's ragged breathing. He wasn't used to consequences. He wasn't used to accountability. And he certainly wasn't used to anyone telling him no. But as the room sat steeped in tension, one more truth was about to surface. One that would shift the night from tragedy to revelation, exposing the final fracture in our already broken family. The room felt hollow after Daniel's collapse into silence. Not physically hollow. The house was still enormous, still filled with ornate furniture, crystal bowls, imported carpets. But emotionally, spiritually, morally, the place felt stripped bare, exposed, like a stage after the actors had been unmasked. People shifted uncomfortably, no longer sure where to look. Some stared at Daniel, seeing him clearly for the first time. Others watched my mother unravel in slow motion, her hand over her mouth, her chest rising and falling with panicked breaths. The rest avoided meeting anyone's eyes at all. This was the part no one had expected when the night began. The fallout, the truth, the pieces of pride that had been smashed on the floor alongside the remnants of their illusions. Grandma stood at the center of the room, an immovable force. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't triumphant. She simply looked resolved, as though a weight she'd carried for years had finally been set down. "Everyone here will leave tonight knowing exactly what they've shown themselves to be," she said quietly. "And each of you will have to live with that. Not me." No one argued. My mother, voice trembling, whispered, "What do you expect us to do now?" Grandma stared at her, eyes tired. "I expect you to grow," she said, "for once in your life." But Margaret didn't understand growth. She only understood comfort and how to cling to it. Her gaze darted to me, frantic. "Olivia, please," she begged, her pride crumbling at last. "I can change. I can try. Just don't turn your back on me." And that was the moment I realized something important. My mother didn't want a relationship. She wanted a lifeline. She wanted rescue. She wanted the version of me she could control. I stepped closer, and for a brief second, hope flickered in her eyes. But I spoke gently, not cruelly. "I'm not turning my back on you," I said. "I'm stepping away so you can finally face the mirror without me taking the blame for what you see." Her expression wavered. Hurt, disbelief, denial flickering across her features like shadows. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "All of you will." But it wasn't a threat. It was a fear she didn't know how to hide. She sank into her chair, defeated, for the first time looking smaller than the room she'd used to make herself feel big. Jennifer, silent now, finally put her phone down. Uncle Robert removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Aunts and cousins quietly gathered their coats, their ambitions shattered. No one wanted to be caught on the wrong side of morality with Grandma still standing. One by one, they slipped out the door, murmuring hollow goodbyes that no longer carried weight. Daniel didn't move. He simply sat there, staring at the floor, shaking. Maybe for the first time in his life, he understood the cost of choices. Real choices. Heavy ones. The kind no inheritance could erase. When the last relative left, the house finally exhaled. Grandma turned to me, her voice softening. "You handled yourself with grace tonight," she said. "More than any of them deserved." I smiled, small but sincere. "I didn't do it for them." She nodded, knowing exactly what I meant. As I walked toward the front door, the cold December air met me like an old friend. I didn't need a coat to feel warm. I had something better, clarity. The kind that settles deep into your bones and stays there. Behind me, the mansion stood tall but empty. Ahead of me, the world was wide open. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't stepping into it alone. I was stepping into it free. Because sometimes the greatest fortune isn't money, it's leaving behind the people who never learned the value of anything at all.